Imagine a species capable of sequencing the human genome, sending probes beyond the edge of the solar system, and simulating the birth of galaxies and supercomputers, yet still unable to consistently hear the sound of its own inner voice. That is us. We've mapped the surface of Mars with more precision than we've understood the terrain of our own emotions. We've built machines that can learn, speak, and write, but struggle to listen to the wisdom embedded in the quiet stirrings of our own biology. We've connected the world through fiber optic cables and orbital satellites, yet somehow remain disconnected from the very consciousness that animates our being. Now, that's not a contradiction. That's a paradox. A civilization that has mastered the external universe while becoming estranged from its internal one. And so the question isn't whether we are alone in the cosmos, it's whether we are alone within ourselves. What if the signals we've been waiting for, from aliens, from gods, from enlightenment Tarrant, beam down from some distant star, but are instead coming from the most overlooked transmitter of all, our own higher cognition, the silent, ever-present witness we rarely acknowledge, the part of us that sees more than just the pixels, more than just the data. It sees meaning, it sees direction, and it's trying earnestly, persistently to get our attention. You might call it consciousness, or the observer, or in more poetic circles, the higher self. But regardless of what name we give it, the phenomenon is real and scientifically fascinating. Because if there's one thing the universe has taught us, from quantum mechanics to neurobiology, it's that layers exist, depth exists, and behind every signal lies a source. So let's ask, what is this higher self? Is it a relic of spiritual language? Or is it simply the most evolved part of our neural architecture, the seat of awareness that watches even as we act? And more importantly, if it's speaking to us, then how does it speak? Not through thunderbolts or burning bushes, but through something far more subtle and far more elegant. Let's begin where most people start listening: pain. Now, from a scientific lens, pain is a survival mechanism. It's the body's way of saying something is wrong, pay attention. But what's often missed is that pain doesn't just point to physical damage. Chronic pain, phantom pain, stress-related illness, these aren't always caused by a torn ligament or broken bone. Sometimes they're informational, symbolic. They rise when the conscious mind ignores something the subconscious knows deeply. Emotional dissonance becomes somatic expression. The metaphor becomes the symptom. You carry stress in your shoulders, maybe because that's where you carry the weight of responsibility. You ache in your knees, perhaps because you're afraid of moving forward. This isn't pseudoscience. It's the intersection of psychology and physiology, a field called psychoneuroimmunology. It tells us that the immune system, the nervous system, and even our hormonal responses all speak to one another in an elegant language of feedback loops and biochemical whispers. And if we listen closely, we realize our bodies are not just vessels for consciousness. They are instruments of communication. They are the message. But of course, the body isn't the only channel. When the lights go out and the neurons quiet down, we enter another theaterone that humanity has long misunderstood, and science is only beginning to probe: the realm of dreams. For centuries, we dismissed dreams as nonsense, static from a sleeping brain. But now we know better. Dreams are the stage where the mind integrates, reconciles, and simulates. They are like cognitive rehearsals, sometimes cryptic, sometimes profound, and remarkably, they carry meaning. In fact, brain scans show that dream states activate many of the same neural regions as waking consciousness. Emotions, memories, problem solving, they're all alive and active, which begs the question, what if your dream wasn't random? What if that recurring image, the bridge collapsing, the forgotten room, the voice you've never heard before, but somehow trust wasn't fiction, but feedback? You see, the higher self doesn't always speak English. It speaks metaphor. It speaks archetype. It speaks in compressed files of symbols, waiting for you to unzip them with reflection and curiosity. And while we're on the topic of symbolism, let's talk about what physicists and spiritual seekers oddly agree on: the reality of patterns. In physics, patterns show up everywhere, from the spirals of galaxies to the double helix of DNA. from the Fibonacci sequence in a sunflower to the rhythm of your heartbeat. And in life, if you're paying attention, patterns emerge too. We call them synchronicities. Now, skeptics might say, coincidence. And yes, chance happens. But when improbabilities begin to stack, when you think of someone and they call, or when a book falls off a shelf that answers a question you never voiced out loud, you begin to wonder whether there's something coordinating beneath the surface. Whether consciousness itself bends reality, not in a magical way, but in a statistical probabilistic nudge. Quantum physics, after all, teaches us that the observer affects the outcome, that particles behave differently when watched. That intention, even at the smallest scale, seems to matter. So what if your higher self is the observer not of atoms, but of your life, and by becoming conscious of it, you collapse the wave function of potential into the particle of decision? What if every moment of resonance, every aha, every gut feeling, every déjà vu, a breadcrumb left by a wiser version of you, guiding you toward coherence? And let's talk about déjà vu, shall we? That strange familiarity with a moment you're certain you've never lived. It's one of those phenomena that sits uneasily between neuroscience and metaphysics. Some say it's a glitch in memory consolidation. Others say it's a fracture in time perception. But there's another possibility, that your mind glimpses a future you've already imagined, or a path your higher self has already mapped. That you're catching a signal from the quantum field of potential where all possibilities exist simultaneously. You're aligning with one, not because of fate, but because of awareness. And in this pursuit of awareness, the most underutilized tool we have is emotion. Not the kind that comes from hormonal surges or knee-jerk reactions, but the deep, resonant kind. The kind that stirs when you're on the right path, or the unease that creeps in when you're not. Emotion, in this view, is not a distraction from reason. It's a data stream from your deepest intelligence. It is the resonance detector of truth. It tells you when your inner compass is aligned. And here's the thing, we've built a society that tells us to suppress this data, to override it, to listen to noise instead of signal. But what if that whisper of joy, that subtle dread, that quiet urge to call someone right now is the message? What if the universe doesn't speak in thunderclaps, but in whispers? What if your higher self has been speaking all along, and all it's asking is for you to pay attention? But attention is a scarce resource. In a world engineered to hijack it for profit, for influence, for entertainment, the idea of pausing to feel, to reflect, to listen has become almost rebellious. We swipe, we scroll, we consume, and yet in all this consumption, we rarely digest. The higher self, however, is patient. It's not impatient like your notifications or needy like your algorithms. It's persistent. It waits through the noise, through the doubt, through the years you spent looking outward for answers only found by looking inward. And it doesn't need fancy rituals or perfect silence. It just needs your presence. Presencino. There's a word that modern science and ancient wisdom finally agree upon. In neuroscience, presence is measurable. It's attention. It's cortical activation in the prefrontal cortex. It's the part of you that regulates your choices instead of reacting automatically. In spiritual language, presence is awareness, consciousness. But both definitions orbit the same truth. To be present is to be awake. And maybe that's what the higher self truly is, not a separate entity, but the awake part of you, the version that isn't lost in past regrets or hypnotized by future anxieties, but the one that stands calmly in the now, like the eye of the hurricane. Still, perceptive, capable. Think of it this way. You are not just the actor in your life. You're also the director. And sometimes you're even the audience. Your higher self is that quiet observer in the back row, watching the entire arc of your character unfold, whispering, "This isn't the scene that defines you. Keep going." But if that's true, why do we feel so disconnected from it? Because disconnection is the default setting of distraction. Because silence feels like discomfort before it becomes revelation. Because we've been taught to outsource our wisdom to a system, to a personality, to a tradition, when in reality, the most radical act of evolution may be to trust your own awareness. Now, I know it sounds poetic, but let's ground it in cognitive science. Your brain has what's called a default mode network system that lights up when you're not focused on the outside world. It's active when you daydream, reflect, or introspect. In other words, the default mode network is what lights up when you go inward. And researchers have found something remarkable. This same network overlaps with regions associated with empathy, memory, and self-awareness. So when you reflect deeply, when you quiet the chatter and simply watch yourself think you're not spacing out, you're tuning in, you're connecting with the part of your mind that doesn't just see what's happening, but what it means. And yet, this process can't be forced. It doesn't happen on a schedule. You can't command a revelation like you summon a taxi, but you can invite it through stillness, through attention, through the humble act of observation. Some do it through meditation, others through journaling. Some people find it in music, in the slow curve of a cello's note that seems to echo something they didn't know they were feeling. Others find it on solitary walks, under open skies, where the rhythm of footsteps and the breeze in their face speaks in ways language never could. What's common in all of these? Not the method, the receptivity, the willingness to be a witness to your own life. And when you do this, when you tune out the clamor and let your awareness float, you may notice something strange. Patterns, signs, the same numbers repeating, the same symbols appearing, the same themes showing up in conversations, books, dreams, coincidences so unlikely they feel choreographed. Let's pause and explore that, not through mysticism, but through the lens of pattern recognition. The human brain is a prediction machine. It doesn't just record data, it seeks meaning. From stars into constellations, from notes into symphonies, from strangers' faces into familiarity. Meaning-making is not optional. It's hardwired. It's how our ancestors survived, interpreting rustling leaves as a possible predator. And it's how we survive now, interpreting inner nudges as signals worth following. So when you notice that strange song playing again, when a quote shows up in a random place that answers a question you didn't even speak aloud, ask yourself, is this just a pattern or is this a signal? And more importantly, what would it cost to find out? Because even if you don't believe in fate or destiny or guiding intelligence, the act of noticing changes you. It heightens your awareness. It puts you into dialogue with your experience. And that by itself is transformative. It shifts you from the role of passive observer to active participant. And maybe that's what your higher self wants more than anything else, Anat, for you to be perfect or spiritual or enlightened, but simply present. Because presence is the birthplace of change. You cannot reroute a path you are not aware you're on. You cannot solve a problem you've never paused long enough to name. And you cannot evolve if you're moving too fast to notice the next doorway. So slow down, notice the goosebumps that arrive when a truth is spoken. Notice the heaviness in your chest when you say yes but meant no. Notice the moment your mind says, this feels familiar, and instead of dismissing it, get curious. Every signal counts. Because the truth is, you are a signal too. You're not just a collection of cells, atoms, and molecules. You are an emergent phenomenon, a brief flare of consciousness in a vast, mysterious universe that seems to be organized not just by matter, but by information. And information wants to move, it wants to express, it wants to communicate, which brings us full circle. Maybe the universe isn't silent after all. Maybe you're not waiting for it to speak. Maybe it's waiting for you to listen. And when you dial in, you finally quiet the noise and tune into the low, steady hum of your own awareness, you'll realize the higher self isn't some mystical other. It's the clearest version of you. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, but the wisest. The one who remembers what you've forgotten. The one who sees your timeline, like an astronomer, sees a galaxy not as a sequence of events, but as a structure, an arc, a beautiful unfolding. And when you begin to live from that place, life doesn't just become easier, it becomes deeper, more dimensional, like a flat map turned globe. like static turn music, like noise turn signal. And all it takes is attention. What's remarkable is this: even in the face of cosmic vastness, the universe has embedded clues of coherence, of purpose, not just out there in the stars, but in here, in you. Consider the sheer improbability of your existence. You are made of atoms forged in stars, stardust arranged into awareness. And yet, in the grand sweep of time, you are here, now thinking, wondering, questioning your place. A molecular machine that contemplates its own programming. A brain capable of imagining what's beyond the brain. That's not just biology, that's poetry, written in hydrogen and oxygen. And still, we act as though this consciousness is a nuisance to be silenced. We medicate it, distract it, numb it, all the while forgetting that it's trying to guide us, trying to evolve us, trying to awaken us. Your higher self isn't some mystical projection floating above your head. It's embedded within your neural complexity. It's the part of your cognition that synthesizes memory, meaning, and morality. And like any advanced intelligence, it speaks in patterns, in probabilities, in patient precision. You might feel it in the friction between what you want and what you know. You might glimpse it in the moments that stop time when you hold your newborn, when you witness the sky erupt in colors during a sunset, when silence hits you like music. These are thresholds, gateways, reminders that you're more than just an algorithm running on flesh. But we often miss the signal because we've grown comfortable with noise, not just external noise honking horns, digital dings, algorithmic clutter, but internal noise too. The stories we loop, the fears we rehearse, the shame we carry, all of it generates static, and static makes it harder to tune in. Yet tuning in is everything. Astronomers build massive radio telescopes to detect the faintest signals from the cosmos signals that traveled billions of years just to arrive at our detectors. But before they can detect those signals, they have to eliminate background noise. They calibrate, they isolate, they listen with exquisite care. So what if your consciousness works the same way? What if your higher self has been broadcasting a signal for years, but you haven't built the inner telescope to receive it? What if you've been waiting for a booming voice from the heavens, when what's actually speaking is the alignment between your thoughts, your biology, and your purpose? That's not magical. That's emergent intelligence. Systems self-organizing across dimensions of perception. The higher self is not a miracle. It's a mechanism, and it's built into the operating system of consciousness itself. And it's relentless. When the gentle nudge fails, it sends a dream. When the dream is dismissed, it manifests emotion. When the emotion is ignored, it speaks through the body. And when even the body is neglected, it begins shaping your environment. Relationships fall apart. Circumstances intensify. And still, the message is the same. Wake up. Not because the universe is punishing you, but because the trajectory of your growth matters. Because evolution is not just a biological process, it's a personal one. And awareness is the fuel. This isn't philosophy for philosophy's sake. This is physics of behavior, of reality, of energy and motion. This is psychology with its sleeves rolled up. Consciousness is not separate from reality. It shapes it. You don't live in a vacuum. You live in a feedback loop. Every decision you make, every perspective you adopt feeds back into the system. It reinforces patterns. It affects biology. It shifts probability fields. And that's why your higher self doesn't care about your ego. It cares about your trajectory. It cares whether you're becoming more coherent or more chaotic. Whether you're moving toward integration or fragmentation. Whether you are reacting blindly or responding consciously. Because only when you're aligned can you begin to shape your life like a physicist shapes an experiment. Deliberately, curiously, responsibly. But that takes discipline. Not in the punishing, rigid way that we've been taught, but in the sacred sense. The kind of discipline that asks, what is true right now? The kind that interrupts the noise and says, what am I actually feeling? The kind that pauses long enough to choose. Because that's the higher self's favorite tool of all, choice. Not willpower, not perfection, but presence in the moment of decision. The ability to observe your reaction before becoming it, to sense your emotion without collapsing into it, to notice the old pattern and gently choose a new one. In neuroscience, this is called neuroplasticity. The brain's ability to rewire itself based on experience. Every time you respond differently, you carve a new path. And over time, those paths become roads, those roads become highways, and eventually you've rerouted the entire map of your mind. But it begins with a single moment of attention, and it deepens with humility, because the higher self isn't arrogant. It's not the voice that says, I already know. It's the voice that says, I'm still learning. It doesn't rush. It doesn't shout. It waits like gravity, silent and immovable, until you finally notice its pull. And that's when something beautiful happens. You begin to see your pain not as punishment, but as a prompt. You begin to see your emotions not as weakness, but as wisdom. You begin to see coincidence not as accident, but as architecture. You begin to see yourself not as separate, but as systemic. A node in the cosmic web, a pattern in the stardust, a flicker of awareness in the fabric of time. And in that awareness, you gain agency, not control over life, but participation in it. You become a co-author, not of outcomes, but of outlook, not of destiny, but of direction. And that's enough, because the point of awakening isn't to escape reality, it's to engage with it fully, fiercely, consciously. To look at the mess of being human and choose to make meaning anyway. To see the chaos and choose to contribute order. To feel the suffering and choose to answer it with presence. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary, because in a universe that keeps expanding, the only thing that makes the human story matter is the way we show up inside of it. And your higher self knows this. It's not trying to make you better. It's trying to make you aware of your choices, aware of your impact, aware of your potential. And most of all, aware of the sacred, improbable, astonishing truth that you are here at this time, in this place, with this capacity for awareness. And what you do with that awareness is the story of your life. So pay attention. It's easy to forget that consciousness is not some mystical vapor floating above your head. It's an emergent property of matter. Neurons fire, synapses connect, and thought arises. But here's what's rarely appreciated. The human brain, this 3-pound galaxy of neural networks, is the most complex structure in the known universe. Trillions of connections, constant electrical storms, and somehow, out of this chaos, meaning emerges, your higher self is not floating in the ether. It's embedded in that complexity like a signal inside the static. It is the version of you that rises above stimulus and response. The one that sees the pattern forming before the first domino falls. And this complexity wasn't built overnight. It's the result of 13.8 billion years of cosmic unfolding, from quarks to stars to cells to thoughts. Evolution did not stop at opposable thumbs. It climbed inward, shaping not just our bones, but our beliefs. Because evolution isn't only genetic, it's also emotional, cognitive, ethical. And now we face a new frontier, not space, not the ocean floor, but the inner domain of consciousness itself. A place we've barely mapped, yet desperately need to explore. Because no technology, no telescope, no quantum computer can substitute for a human being who is aware of their thoughts, aware of their reactions, aware of their patterns. We've studied galaxies billions of light years away, and yet some people live entire lives without ever truly observing themselves. That's the challenge. That's the invitation. To become the scientist of your own awareness. So let's treat consciousness like a frontier. Let's examine it not as dogma, but as data. What do the facts say? Fact. Your body stores memory not just in your brain, but in your muscles, your posture, your gut. Fact. Trauma can echo for decades in the nervous system, shaping your responses long after the event has passed. Fact. Emotions change the chemistry of your body. Cortisol spikes with fear. Oxytocin rises with love. Your biology is your biography. So when your chest tightens in a conversation, or your stomach sinks before a choice, don't ignore it. That's data. That's information. That's your inner world speaking in the only language it knows. The higher self doesn't send text messages. It sends sensations. And when you don't listen, when you override, suppress, or numb, those messages don't vanish. They magnify, they loop, they morph into symptoms, into fatigue, into decisions that don't make sense but somehow keep repeating, not because you're broken, but because some part of you is trying to complete a sentence you never finished. And maybe that's the most empowering idea of all. You are not broken, you are broadcasting. Even your dysfunctions are attempts to communicate. Even your fears are messages in disguise. So the question isn't what's wrong with me. The question is, what is my higher self trying to show me through this discomfort, through this relationship, through this recurring dream, through this unshakable feeling that something more is possible? That's not wishful thinking. That's inquiry, that's awareness, that's science at its most personal. Because science is not the cold dissection of matter, it is the pursuit of pattern, the search for structure, the longing to know. And you too, long to know who you are, why you're here, what your life means. And those questions don't make you weak, they make you human. And maybe, just maybe, they make you divine. Because if there is such a thing as a divine spark, it's not found in temples or galaxies, it's found in the moment you choose to become aware. The moment you pause, reflect, and say, I see the loop, I see the lesson, I see the part of me that knew all along. That's transcendence. Not floating above life, but fully entering it with your eyes wide open and your awareness switched on. And from that place, everything changes. You stop outsourcing your wisdom, you stop waiting for permission, you stop blaming circumstances, because you realize your life is not happening to you, it's happening through you. And the higher self, that wise witnessing presence, is not far away. It's right here. It's you, minus the fear, you minus the noise, you minus the illusion that you were ever disconnected. So the task is not to become someone new. The task is to remember who you already are beneath the programming, beneath the pain, beneath the layers of roles you've worn like armor. You are not the mask. You are not the reaction. You are not the performance. You are the one who sees. And the more you see, the more the world opens. Because the universe mirrors your level of awareness. That's not just metaphor. That's physics. In quantum theory, systems don't settle into one state until observed. It's called the observer effect. And in a very real way, your attention collapses possibility into reality. So ask yourself, what am I choosing to observe? What story am I energizing? What possibility am I collapsing into? And is that story worthy of the universe that made me? Because if we're going to invoke the cosmos, let's be honest about what it took to get you here. Supernovae had to explode to make your iron. Planets had to collide to make your moon. Life had to survive asteroids, ice ages, and extinction events just to get you a brain with the bandwidth to wonder. You are not a fluke. You are not an accident. You are a phenomenon billions of years in the making. So don't waste your signal. Don't mute the message because it arrives quietly. Don't underestimate the power of awareness just because it doesn't shout. Because in the end, awareness is what separates the machine from the miracle. It's what turns reaction into response. It's what turns suffering into understanding. It's what turns life from a random series of events into a story worth telling. And the author of that story, it's been waiting to meet you. It's been whispering between your thoughts. It's been guiding your hands, softening your heart, sending signals through biology, synchronicity, dreams, deja vu, emotion, memory. It's been patiently pointing you home, not to a place, but to a state of being. And now, finally, you're starting to hear it. You're starting to feel it. You're starting to remember. So listen, because your higher self is not a myth. It's not a fantasy. It's not out there. It's here, now, always. And all it's asking is that you pay attention. There's something profoundly humbling about realizing that the same atoms that make up your thoughts also make up distant stars, that the carbon in your body came from a supernova, that the calcium in your bones was born inside ancient stellar furnaces. You are literally made of star stuff, as Carl Sagan once said, but it's more than a poetic sentiment. It's a scientific reality, cosmic inheritance. And with that inheritance comes not just wonder, but responsibility. Because the story of the cosmos didn't stop at atoms, it didn't stop at cells, it didn't stop at apes using tools. It arrived here in you with your fears, your dreams, your doubts, your capacity to choose. And now that you know this, now that you've felt the signal of your own higher intelligence, the question isn't what's out there. It's what do I do with this awareness? Because awareness without action becomes paralysis. Realization without responsibility becomes narcissism. So the higher self doesn't just want you to awaken, it wants you to engage, to become a node of clarity in a network of confusion, to become a transmitter of coherence in a field of static, to become the kind of human being whose presence is its own form of healing. And this isn't about perfection. This isn't about sainthood. This is about participation. When you listen to your inner voice, when you make choices aligned with your inner truth, you are contributing to something larger than your life. You are shifting the signal of the collective. You are raising the frequency of the whole. Because just as neurons shape the brain, individuals shape the world. And the world right now is aching for aligned individuals. We're facing challenges unprecedented in scale. Environmental collapse, political division, technological acceleration outpacing wisdom. These aren't just global issues. They are personal tests of consciousness. Will you act from fear or from clarity? Will you retreat into comfort or rise into complexity? Will you deny the signal or amplify it? Because if enough of us begin to amplify it, something extraordinary happens. The noise becomes music. The chaos becomes rhythm. The fragments become pattern. And the species that once lived in separation begins to operate like a single integrated organism with vision, with memory, with purpose. This isn't science fiction. It's evolutionary potential. And the bridge between where we are and where we could be is built one aware individual at a time. One human who dares to stop sleepwalking, one soul who dares to speak truth even when it trembles, one mind who listens, really listens to the higher intelligence humming beneath the surface of their own biology. And when that happens, when you begin to live from that place, you don't just feel better, you become better, more present, more discerning, more compassionate, not because you're trying to be those things, but because awareness naturally produces them. Just as gravity organizes matter, awareness organizes behavior. And from that organization, new possibilities emerge. You begin to forgive where you once condemned. You begin to understand where you once judged. You begin to choose where you once reacted. You begin to shape reality, not as a victim, but as a vessel of insight, a vessel of agency, a vessel of remembrance. Because the truth is, and always has been, that you're not here by accident. You're here because the universe needed you. Your perspective, your signal, your light, and that signal becomes stronger every time you pause. Every time you reflect, every time you remember that your life is not just a timeline, it is a transmission. And it's being received by every person you touch, every system you inhabit, every future you influence. So ask yourself, what do I want my signal to carry? What kind of ripple do I want to send through this field of existence? And most importantly, who am I becoming every time I listen? Because the higher self isn't finished. It's not a final destination. It's an evolving intelligence, constantly adapting, constantly unfolding, just like the cosmos itself. And maybe that's the final message, that your journey is the universe learning to know itself, that your awareness is an aperture through which reality becomes self-aware, that your struggle, your healing, your awakening are not side effects of life. They are life, and they matter. So as the noise of the world grows louder, as the distractions multiply, as the external voices scream for your attention, remember this: there is a quieter voice, a steadier pulse, a deeper truth, and it lives within you not as fantasy, but as function, not as myth, but as mechanism, not as magic, but as a miracle of consciousness. Your higher self is real. It's awake, and it's waiting. All it needs, all it's ever needed, is for you to pause and pay attention.